Right now, as you're watching this video, something is crawling on your face. Microscopic mites called demodex live inside the pores of your skin, and every night when you go to bed and close your eyes, they crawl out to feed and to mate on your cheeks. And you're the cleaner version of this story. Your ancestors had it way worse. The Stone Age wasn't an adventure. It was basically just being eaten alive every single day by things you couldn't see, couldn't name, and had absolutely no way of stopping. If you'd been born 10,000 years ago, there's one fact you'd have had to make peace with immediately. Something was always feeding on you. You could be the strongest, cleanest, most careful person in your entire tribe, and it wouldn't matter. So let's start with the thing that had the easiest access of all, your own hair. Lice didn't have to work for it. All they needed was some physical touch, and sleeping pressed against a bunch of other humans made it easier for lice to spread. We know this because we found the receipts. Lice eggs glued to hair on Egyptian mummies, on South American mummies, on bodies pulled out of bogs thousands of years later. When a louse punches through your scalp, it injects a chemical to stop your blood from clotting, and feeds while a female glues up to 10 eggs a day onto your hair, using your own body heat as an incubator. Body lice carried the bacteria behind trench fever and epidemic typhus. A medieval mass grave in France came back positive for both plague and louse-borne disease in the same skulls, and nearly a third of Napoleon's soldiers buried in Vilnius showed signs of louse-borne infection. Something smaller than a grain of rice helped take down armies. And if lice had the run of your hair, fleas had the run of your bed. Animal hide, packed straw, whatever you slept on, something was already living in it, and there was no washing it out. A flea can jump 150 times its own body length, which in human terms is clearing a football field in a single leap, and it uses that jump to land, bite, and vanish before you even feel it. It barely needs to eat, either. It can sit there for months without a meal and just wait. By now, it's common knowledge that the Black Death, a pandemic that erased something close to half of Europe in a handful of years, happened because of fleas, which tells you everything about how dangerous these bugs can be. Fleas at least had the decency to stay on the ground. Mosquitoes came from the air. If you had to guess the deadliest creature in human history, your brain would probably go somewhere with teeth or claws. And you'd be wrong. Mosquitoes kill more people every year than any other animal on the planet. Not sharks, not even lions, but an insect you could flick off your arm while watching TV. You're chilling in your bedroom, minding your own business, when suddenly you hear the most annoying buzzing sound known to humans. Your ancestors had the same experience, except they didn't have a bedroom. They were practically living inside a cloud of them, every single night. Ticks and leeches deserve a mention too, mostly out of respect for their patience. A tick will sit in tall grass for literally years waiting for a warm body to walk past, then bury its head into your skin and feed for days without you noticing anything was wrong. A leech does the same thing, except it's polite enough to release an anesthetic first, so you don't find out until you look down and count how many are already attached. So that was the outside. The inside was way worse. Scientists have a method for looking directly into the gut of your ancient ancestors. It is called a coprolite, which is just a fancy name for examining ancient poop. Now that we get that information out of the way, let's talk about the tapeworm. It gets in through a piece of undercooked meat. It then finds the wall of your intestine and latches on with a head about the size of a pinhead, covered in hooks and suckers, and then it just keeps growing. It doesn't even bother with a mouth. It absorbs food straight through its skin, drinking your meal before your own body gets a chance to touch it. The average one reaches somewhere between 3 and 6 meters inside a person, which is about 20 feet of worm coiled up inside you. The longest one ever pulled from a human body was 30 meters, longer than a school bus. Your ancestor just kept eating and kept waking up hungry, losing weight they couldn't explain, for as long as it stayed. Hookworms are worse. A tapeworm at least needs you to make a mistake first. Drink the wrong water, eat the wrong thing. A hookworm just needs your bare foot to touch the ground. It drills straight through your skin and goes on a tour of your entire body, into your bloodstream, through your heart, into your lungs, up your throat, and back down again when you swallow, before it finally anchors itself in your small intestine with a set of curved hooks and starts feeding on your blood, for years. The result is an anemia so constant it stops feeling like a sickness and starts feeling like your personality. A fatigue so deep that getting out of bed becomes the hardest thing you do all day. In children, it stunts growth permanently. There's no catching up afterward, and your ancestor felt every bit of it. The exhaustion, the hunger that never let up, the cramps with no explanation, without ever once suspecting a worm had anything to do with it. We're not guessing about any of this. In 1991, hikers in the Alps found a body sticking out of the ice. His name was Otzi, and he'd been up there 5,300 years. When scientists examined his gut, they found whipworm eggs. In his bag, they found birch fungus, a remedy he was very likely carrying for exactly this. Now let's talk about how ancient humans fought back. Before you start feeling too sorry for your ancestors, there is something you need to understand about them. They were not just sitting there. They had no medicine, no concept of what a parasite even was, and yet somehow, they figured out how to fight back. The first weapon they had was each other. You know that feeling when someone runs their fingers through your hair and every single muscle in your body just relaxes? Turns out that is not just a nice feeling. That is one of the oldest survival reflexes in the primate brain, hardwired directly into your nervous system. In early human groups, this was one of the most critical survival behaviors that existed. Picking lice out of someone's hair, pulling a tick before it buried in too deep, catching an infected wound before flies turned it into something far worse. And today, your brain still remembers it. Then there was fire. Sleeping near smoke kept the mosquitoes away, and people noticed. So they taught it to their kids, who taught it to their kids. Rubbing ash and clay into the skin created a physical barrier against anything trying to find a way in. Avoiding water at night, staying out of dense undergrowth, never sleeping near a dead animal. This was just knowledge, passed from parent to child for hundreds of generations, refined through thousands of years of watching people die and slowly figuring out why. And then there were plants. Here's a detail that I think about more than I'd like to admit. In 2016, archaeologists found a 3,700-year-old ivory comb in the ruins of an ancient Canaanite city in modern-day Israel. Carved into it was the earliest known complete sentence ever written in a phonetic alphabet, the same one that eventually became the alphabet you're reading right now. And that sentence, the very first thing humanity ever committed to writing, reads, "May this tusk root out the lice of the hair and the beard." The first sentence ever written in human history was a complaint about lice, which honestly tracks. And when researchers examined the comb under a microscope, they found actual lice remained still on the teeth, 3,700 years later. Wormwood, one of the oldest antiparasitic plants on Earth, its name literally comes from the old German word for worm, because that is what it was known for. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest surviving medical documents in existence from ancient Egypt around 1550 BC, lists it as a treatment for intestinal worms. Garlic was used for the exact same purpose across Egypt, Greece, and China, independently, with zero contact between those cultures. Three completely separate civilizations, on three different parts of the planet, all arriving at the same conclusion, which tells you something about how universal the worm problem must have been. And here's the part of this story that genuinely gets me. Somewhere in ancient China, over 1,600 years ago, someone figured out that a wormwood preparation could treat fever. They wrote it down. That text survived dynasties, wars, and the collapse of entire civilizations, passed from hand to hand for 16 centuries, until a scientist named Tu Yu read it in 1972, followed the ancient instructions, isolated the active compound, and won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2015 for it. The first Chinese woman ever to win one. Your ancestors figured out a plant that worked, wrote it down, and passed it through civilization after civilization for over 1,000 years. A scientist read those notes in 1972 and won a Nobel Prize for it. The knowledge outlived every empire that carried it. But I have to be straight with you about how this part of the story actually ends. The worms came back the next season. The lice returned within days. The ticks always found someone again. For every clever trick passed down through hundreds of generations, your ancestors were not winning this fight. They were barely surviving alongside it. And then, in what amounts to basically a blink in human history, almost all of it disappeared. In 1854, a cholera outbreak in the Soho district of London killed 600 people in a single week. A local doctor named John Snow mapped every single case by hand, traced them back to a single water pump on Broad Street, and persuaded the city council to remove the pump handle. The epidemic stopped. Snow didn't even fully understand germ theory yet. Nobody did at the time. He just followed the pattern. But that one act cascaded into the modern sanitation systems that changed everything. Within about 100 years, we had wiped out most of what had lived on and inside humans for 300,000 years, which sounds like a clean win. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting. In 2003, an immunologist at University College London named Graham Rook proposed what he called the old friends hypothesis. The argument goes like this. Your immune system didn't evolve in a sterile environment. It evolved in the middle of all of this. Worms, parasites, bacteria, they'd been coexisting with humans for so long that your immune system had actually learned to work around them. They were part of the calibration. A study in Gabon found that children infected with worms had significantly calmer immune responses to allergens than their uninfected classmates. The kids with parasites had more settled immune systems than the kids without them. Take these organisms away almost overnight, and the system is still armed, still looking for a fight, so sometimes it just turns on you instead. Rook linked this to the explosion of allergies, autoimmune diseases, and inflammatory conditions that have skyrocketed in wealthy countries over the last 100 years. Your body isn't broken. It just hasn't gotten the memo that the war is over. And if we're being completely honest with each other, that mite on your face right now hasn't gone anywhere either. People still catch lice, the same way your ancestors did for tens of thousands of years. And today, more than 1 billion people on this planet are walking around with worms living inside them. We didn't really beat parasites. We just got better at not noticing them.